I'm going to talk today generally both about atheism and skepticism, and I'm going to ask how atheists and skeptics groups can be robust and inclusive and ethical. And there's a balance there because they're often conflicting in terms of if you're trying to be robust and trying to be inclusive, that can be a tricky balance. But I'm suggesting that there's three underlying principles that are important to this. Firstly is that we should treat ideas and beliefs as different to people. We should respect people's right to hold whatever beliefs that they want to hold, but that doesn't mean that we have to respect either the process by which they arrive at those beliefs or the content of the beliefs themselves, and I think we should be robustly critical of both of those second parts. The second point I'm going to suggest is that we should apply the same underlying principles to all of our thinking about reality and morality, which is that we should robustly apply reason to whatever the currently best available evidence is, and that we shouldn't make a distinction between some areas of life that we will apply those principles to and other areas that we will give a free pass to. And thirdly, while doing this, I'm going to suggest that we should be trying to build ethical, both atheist and skeptic groups and societies generally, and that we should be basing our morality and our ethics on the human attributes of compassion and empathy and fairness and justice and cooperation and reciprocity. And that all of those principles, they're not supernatural, they're human attributes. They're not given to us by gods, and they're the basis upon which we should be building both ethical groups and ethical societies. I'm going to cover 5 areas in the talk where we can apply those. First of all, promoting skeptical inquiry over faith-based conclusions. The second is promoting atheism over faith-based supernaturalism. The third is promoting natural compassion and ethics, which is what I've just touched on there. The fourth is promoting inclusive, caring atheist and skeptic groups. And the fifth is promoting fair and just societies with skeptical government, or with secular government, with skeptical government as well, with secular government. And I'll start with the first one, promoting skeptical inquiry over faith-based conclusions. And I'm going to suggest that skeptic and atheist groups face the same underlying problems. And that underlying problem isn't pseudoscience for skeptics and religion for atheists. The underlying problems that we both face are faith and dogma. And both of those can be applied to secular projects as well as to religious projects. But what I mean by faith in that context is faith is believing things, firstly because you want to believe them. You don't say, I have faith that I'll get hit by cars across the road. So faith is you want to believe something. And secondly is you're believing it disproportionately to the currently best available evidence. Dogma is believing things unquestioningly, or even worse, insisting that the beliefs are not to be questioned. So that combination of faith and dogma is the underlying problem that I think atheist groups face and that skeptical groups face. And as I say, they can be applied equally to secular projects as they can to religious projects. People can have faith in communism, in fascism, in the unregulated free market. There are any range of areas where people will apply faith and dogma and cause the consequent problems that arise from them. But the difference between religious faith and dogma and secular faith and dogma is secular faith and dogma eventually bumps into reality. And people notice that it's not working. Whereas with religious faith and dogma, it hides its testability in this kind of imaginary afterlife. And so it doesn't come up against the tests that secular faith and dogma eventually have to come up against. Now, I start from the position as a skeptic that we can't know anything. Certainly we can't know anything for certain. And that's nothing to do with the nature of the evidence for claims. It's to do with the nature of our brains. Essentially, when we say that we know something, approximately what we're saying is that we believe or we conclude that what we think corresponds to reality. And then how can we test the reliability of our conclusion? Well, how did we come to our conclusion? Ultimately, through our thinking. And how are we going to test the reliability of our thinking? Again, ultimately through our thinking. So you have a circular problem there that effectively, to use an analogy, it is like measuring something with a ruler and then trying to test the reliability of that ruler by measuring the thing again with the same ruler. So technically speaking, strictly speaking, we cannot know anything. Now obviously in practical terms, in order to function sanely, we have to make certain assumptions about the nature of the world that we live in. And so what what we do in that context is, just even in terms of basically, are we here today or are we dreaming it? Is our house going to be there when we go home? These are things that we just take for granted. But essentially, what we're doing, without thinking it through, is there's a whole load of unspoken, implicit assumptions when we say that we know something, and they include, based on the currently best available evidence, based on the possibility that I might be mistaken, based on being open to new evidence of changing my mind. They're all the sort of implicit, unspoken assumptions if you say that you know something. And on the basis of those assumptions, I'm comfortable in saying that I know various things. And taking into account all of those caveats, the best way to figure out how close we can come to truth, we can never actually reach truth for the reason that I've outlined, but the best way that we can approach it is the scientific method, and by applying reason and critical thinking to the currently best available evidence. Because if a belief is independently testable by a number of people using independent criteria and it consistently comes up with the same results, then that is more likely to be correct than beliefs than processes that enable different people to reach different conclusions based on the same evidence. So the scientific method of proposing hypotheses, testing them against evidence and seeing whether the results of the testing matches with the expectation, and then constantly being willing to revise the knowledge that you have gained and update it when you get information is the best way to approach not only science, because this is not a science society, this is a skeptical society, but also other areas that would be considered typically outside of the range of science, which I'm going to suggest later on, are not. And the second area, this will move on to the second point I'm making, which goes into this point, which is promoting atheism over faith-based supernaturalism. Now, obviously, atheist groups will support atheism over faith-based supernaturalism. I'm going to suggest today that robust skeptic groups should also challenge faith-based supernaturalism and shouldn't give it a kind of a free pass when you're approaching your work as a skeptical group. Now, firstly, I want to clear up a common misunderstanding about atheism. Because a lot of people believe that atheism is a claim of certainty, and it's not. A lot of people believe that you've kind of like got a scale of theism at one end and atheism at the other end, and in the middle you have agnosticism, which is kind of approximately I don't know. But that's not what atheism is. Atheism and theism are indeed two different options, and it's a binary position. Do you believe a God exists or do you not believe a God exists? But that's about belief. It's about what you believe. It's not what about you claim to know. Agnosticism is about what you claim to be able to know or what you claim to be unable to know. And so if you believe, even strongly believe that there's no God, which is my position, I believe based on the currently best available evidence that there's considerably more evidence to suggest that there are no gods and that the idea of gods is invented by humans than it is that there are gods. But you can strongly believe that there's no gods, and at the same time not claim to be able to know that there are no gods, and therefore be both an atheist and an agnostic. They're different areas of discourse. Atheism and theism are about what you believe. Agnosticism is about what you claim to be able to know. So a lot of people who are reluctant to call themselves atheists on the basis that they think that it's a claim of knowledge, or even worse, that they think it's a claim of certainty, that's not the case. Neither I nor Richard Dawkins nor any atheist that I know claims for certain to know that there's no God. But what we are prepared to say is, based on the caveats that I've outlined before in talking about applying reason to the currently best available evidence, that as a working hypothesis there is considerably more evidence to suggest that the idea of gods was invented by humans and that gods do not exist than there is to suggest that gods actually do exist. And I'm going to suggest that giving ideas about gods and religions a kind of free pass from skeptical inquiry is a mistake. Because once you concede that claims can be made on the basis of supernatural beliefs, you're effectively opening the door to allowing people to make whatever claim they want without backing up with evidence. And I don't think that's a position that skeptical groups should take. Now, whether you end up concluding or not that gods do exist, or that gods are telling people to behave in such and such a manner. Whatever conclusion you come to, I don't think that it is an appropriate starting point to just say, well, this is what skeptics do, and this is what religious people do, and they can believe that, and we will put our skeptical inquiry towards other things, but we won't put it towards that. I had a quick look on your website, the Irish Skeptics Society website, to see what it says about the relationship between the Skeptic Society and religion. And the relevant section says, are skeptics anti-religious? No, people are sometimes concerned that skeptics are by definition anti-religious. This is not the case. There are many skeptics who have religious beliefs and who distinguish clearly between questions concerning the material world, the realm of science, and a non-material world in which they believe and for which there is no physical evidence. Such belief is a matter of choice or faith, and the majority of skeptics accept and respect this. And going back to what I was saying earlier on, I believe that it's quite appropriate to accept and respect the right of religious people to believe what they want in terms of choosing their beliefs based on faith. I think that skeptics should not respect the process of choosing beliefs based on faith, and skeptics should not respect the contents of beliefs based on faith unless those beliefs are independently supported by evidence. We wouldn't do this if people were to say that they are making certain medical choices to treat cancer based on faith. And we shouldn't do it if they're choosing to make other major life decisions, either for themselves or for family members or for society in general, based on faith. Now, the Skeptic Society website continues that there are, however, areas of overlap. If claims are made in the name of religion that concern physical phenomena and that can be tested, skeptics may engage in such testing. For example, claims of statues moving or of miraculous appearances or cures may be challenged. Now, claims of statues moving and miraculous cures should, of course, be challenged. And it's pretty trivial to challenge. I mean, we can show that statues don't move. You know, we can show that by statistics that you have a greater chance of dying than getting cured if you go to Lourdes. But religion makes far more fundamental claims than that, based on faith. It makes far more fundamental and testable claims. Like religion makes claims about morality, not just about reality. And it makes claims that cause people to base their entire lives and to tell other people to base their entire lives on the basis of these claims that are in their minds coming from gods. And so that puts an onus on the people who have these beliefs that goes beyond if it was something that they just believe themselves. If they're trying to use those beliefs to shape society, it puts a stronger onus on them to defend those beliefs. And they may be able to defend them, you know, who knows? But skeptics should be prepared to challenge them to defend those beliefs rather than just give them a free ride. Because this is the underlying reason that religion is harmful is more because of its effect on society's morality than it is because of its effect on pure claims of physical reality. And so skeptic groups, I think, should challenge both of those beliefs. So we're coming to the core of what I'm going to talk about now, which is promoting natural compassion and ethics, and how we combine that robust challenge to ideas with a compassionate and supportive approach to people. Most people will argue, or certainly a lot of people will argue, that atheism and skepticism are not related to morality, and I disagree with that. I promote what I call ethical atheism. Because I believe that atheism, that both theism and atheism, let's start with theism. Theism is not merely an assertion about the nature of reality. Theism is also an assertion about the nature of morality. And therefore atheism, by extension, as a response to that, is also an assertion about the nature of morality. It's not an assertion that says that you have to do A, B, and C specifically in order to act ethically. But it is a claim about how we arrive at moral decisions, and if you believe that there are no gods, then you necessarily believe that we don't get our ideas of morality from gods. And whereas that shouldn't be a major, deal, in reality it is, because we live in a society where most people believe the opposite. We live in a society where most people do believe that morality comes from gods, and that shapes how society evolves, and that should shape our response to how society is evolving. Now, the second part of this equation is I also believe that skeptical inquiry is related to morality. And the reason that I think of that is that because morality is essentially related to how we treat other sentient beings and how we relate to each other. Now, and from my perspective, that would include not just human beings, but non-human animals as well. But that's essentially, roughly, whatever your disagreements about the detail, that's roughly the area that morality is about. And the underlying reason that we care about, quack cures for cancer is that they cause unnecessary suffering. And religion also causes unnecessary suffering in the same way. And these are effects that, as skeptics, we can measure. At least at the ends of the scale. At least some things are definitely causing unnecessary suffering. Some things are definitely helping sentient beings to thrive. There's a grey area in the middle, but the fact that there's a grey area in the middle doesn't mean that we can't address the areas where it is pretty clear, and that we can't make recommendations where it is pretty clear on what policies are measurably causing greater unnecessary suffering or less unnecessary suffering. There's a group called the World Values Survey, which is a team of interdisciplinary social scientists around the world that for the last few decades have been examining the impact or the interrelated impact of human values on society and vice versa around the world. And what they're finding is that most human values can be mapped onto two scales. If you imagine an X and Y axis, and the horizontal axis is individual people moving from, on one end of the scale, from survival values towards, on the other end of the scale, self-expression values. And that move from survival values towards self-expression values is typically triggered by things like investment in health and education and communications technology, and moves towards greater democracy and a greater perception of self-control of your life, even if it's not actually true. That those are the things that can enable individuals to move from survival values along the scale towards self-expression values. Now, as individuals do that, and this is shown again and again in country around the world, as individuals move, and as enough individuals move along the scale from survival values towards self-expression values, society moves away from traditional religious values and towards secular rational values. And that's a pretty consistent pattern. The only place that it isn't really happening for some reason is Africa, but around, if you check the World Values Survey site, you'll find that around the world, that is generally the trend that society is taking. The world is generally becoming more secular. Now, you will notice as well that that there are more fundamentalist groups, and part of the reason for that, I would suggest, is that as what used to be traditional moderate / traditional religion is coming under pressure from both is coming under pressure both in terms of its claims about reality being challenged by science, its claims about morality being challenged by secular liberal democracy. That what happens is some people will accept those changes and will become more secular, and other people will resist those changes and become more fundamentalist. So you simultaneously have a rise of secularism and fundamentalism at the same time, and I think that's what we're seeing around the world, and how we respond to that is going to be a very big test for humanity generally, as well as in particular localities. There are other studies that have shown that in secular societies, that secular individuals and atheist individuals are in terms of a skeptical perspective, are less likely to be dogmatic, authoritarian, are also less likely to be sexist, racist, homophobic. There's a range of areas, of attributes that I suspect most skeptics would feel are good ethically, that are more common in secular societies than in religious societies. And now, however the cause and effect is measured, I mean, it could well be that it is the moves towards this type of thinking that make society less religious rather than vice versa. But whatever the relationship, it's something that I think as skeptics it is worth examining and testing as robustly as we as skeptics would test other claims about the nature of reality. I was looking at, I don't mean to be critical here, but I was looking at your talks, the list of talks over the last since 2002. And first of all, I want to say they sounded fascinating, and I wish I'd been to more than when I saw them all listed. It's really, really impressive. But one thing that jumps out, if you're an atheist, And if you do believe in this sort of correlation between the type of thinking underlying atheism and the type of thinking underlying skepticism is, and I may be being unfair here because I'm only basing this on the titles of the talks, but of the talks, there have been 66 talks since 2002, of which 3 have overtly addressed religion in their titles. And all of those were between 2002 and 2008. So in your first 33 talks, you had 9% of your talks addressed religion, and in your next 33 talks, 0% of your talks overtly address religion in their titles. Now that's mitigated by the fact that this year so far, 100% of your talks are addressing religion. So I would hope that you consider keeping up maybe that type of percentage. So that's just a general thing. And to be honest, I can perfectly understand how the dynamics of a skeptic group, particularly in a society where there is also an atheist group in existence, where there wouldn't seem to be the urgency to address that, and particularly where there's an overlap of members, and people will kind of almost divide their time up and say, okay, I'll do my atheist stuff here and I'll do my skeptic stuff there. But I think there is more of an overlap, particularly because a lot of people, the atheism and skepticism are so interrelated that say if you just take it as just an approximate, I know this is a ridiculous way to measure it, but if you take that overall, say about 5% of your talks have been religious related, are the problems in Irish society that are skepticism related, that are caused by religion, are they only 5% of the problems that we need to address, or are they higher? And if you think of that, it might be higher than maybe having more talks that are overtly addressing the relationship between religion and skepticism could be useful. Whatever conclusions you come to, I'm not saying they have to come to the same conclusions, but at least they're worthy of the same level of robust skeptical inquiry that skeptics would address to other areas. The fourth area I want to touch on is the issue of promoting inclusive and caring atheist and skeptic groups. Now, when we form a group for any purpose, I think we should be, and this isn't limited to atheist or skeptic groups, we should be ethical about what we're doing. We should make our groups as inclusive and as caring and as supportive of people, whether or not they agree with our core values, as we can. And that includes having policies to make people feel comfortable and enjoy coming to our events. It includes, one of the things that Atheist Ireland does is we will only hold our events in disability accessible venues. We try to include people of diverse backgrounds in our planning and our activities. We've had various conferences and seminars, one on empowering women through secularism and others on other areas related to social justice areas. And we also work with other groups, other advocacy groups in other social justice areas, including combined approaches to the United Nations Human Rights Committee and to the Irish government on various issues where people are discriminated against. I think it's important as well, and this is one of the biggest challenges at the moment to trying to do that, is the internet. It's brilliantly useful in a load of ways, but one of the difficulties with the internet is that online communication can tend to get out of hand very quickly. And people can be really nice people in real life, and then they get behind a keyboard and they turn into something completely different. Like online debates, they can magnify hostility and misunderstanding when compared to real life conversations. And I think that there's a range of rules that I'm kind of developing a suggested approach to online about how to treat people respectfully without assuming good faith when you're talking to people, about not responding in anger when people attack you in anger, and not stereotyping people who disagree with us, and engaging reasonably with people who sincerely disagree, as long as they are being polite. Like if somebody is behaving unethically, ask them to withdraw or apologise, whatever it is that they have said that is incorrect, but don't respond in kind, don't attack back in kind, because that's not only just counterproductive, but it just escalates the hostility. One of the things that we found really, unfortunately, in the atheist movement over the last few years is that it's become kind of trendy to attack Richard Dawkins and just invent a caricature of Richard Dawkins that is just completely inaccurate. And that narrative has It started to leak into mainstream media as well now, which is quite both inaccurate, unjust, hurtful, and unhelpful. The final area I want to touch on is the idea of promoting fair and just societies with secular government. And I think, first of all, as atheists, I'll divide this into atheists and skeptics. As atheists, we should empathise with other groups that are facing discrimination in society, because we face discrimination in society. Most religious people don't even realise that we're discriminated against, because the status quo is so invisible to them that they don't realise that saying that we want secular schools that are neutral for our children, where they're not indoctrinated. They see that as us challenging their right to have a religious school, and they see us as looking for atheist schools. But we're not. We're not looking for atheist schools. An atheist school would be a school that actively teaches that there's no God. We're looking for neutral schools that don't teach, that teach about religion and beliefs in an objective and critical and pluralistic way, but that don't claim that either position is true. And the way to try to challenge that thinking is to reverse it. If hypothetically, if there was even one school in Ireland that actively taught children that there's no God, which we're not looking for, and if there was even one set of parents who, by force of circumstances, had to send their child to that school because it was the only school in their locality, and they were Catholic parents, we'd never hear the end of it until that was resolved. People would immediately realise that it's inappropriate. But because the status quo is just so ingrained, and people are so desensitised, they don't realise the discrimination. But we notice the discrimination because we face it every day, and so we should equally be sensitive to discrimination faced by other marginalised groups in society, and we should be working with other marginalised groups in society to jointly tackle the discrimination that we and they face by the way that society has evolved. Now, if we move on to wearing our sceptical hats, I think as skeptics that we should be objectively examining the impacts of social discrimination. And where it is measurable, we should be trying to identify the scale of it and the best ways to challenge the discrimination that exists. Because by definition, like, prejudice almost depends on people not having all of the relevant information available to them. And as skeptics groups, we're kind of uniquely positioned in some ways to analyse and provide all of the information on a rational basis, so that based on the benefits to individuals and to societies of tackling such things as racism and sexism and homophobia and other prejudices and discriminations. And it's at least as interesting a topic as many of the things that skeptic groups rightly discuss, and I suggest that it is a more useful area to address than many of them. Now, I suggest that in all of that context, that religion has corrupted building fair and just societies, and that we as atheists and skeptics should be promoting fair and just societies, that we should tackle specific injustices that are directly related to religious dogmas, in terms of reproductive health rights, same-sex marriage, blasphemy and apostasy accusations, genital mutilations, honour killings, all of these issues that are directly related to religious faith and dogma, I think we should be challenging directly. As atheists, we should build alliances, as I mentioned, with other groups that are also facing discrimination in society, and that are also facing just invisible prejudices. And we should identify and work together on specific issues that enable us to support and empower each other. And that as skeptics, we should be objectively examining the impact of all of these discriminations and injustices on society. And we should be trying to develop evidence-based arguments to tackle all of these social problems. And that can in turn guide our just innate ethical instincts. I think we should be actively trying to, as well as doing what we're doing in our respective groups internally, that we should be taking positive actions in terms of community outreach to deal with other groups and to offer the expertise that we have in various areas to other groups to help them to promote their rights and to challenge the discriminations that they face. And finally, I think that we should be actively lobbying the government, both in terms of the government here, in terms of local government, national government, and in terms of human rights oversight bodies like the United Nations Human Rights Committee, that we should be actively lobbying for laws that are evidence-based, that are secular, and that both respect human rights and help people to lead a thriving life free of unnecessary suffering and discrimination. Thank you very much.